Hi, and welcome back to Reddit Terrible Stories. I refused to let my parents pick my child up from school without permission. It started with something small, or at least it seemed small at first. My parents had always been heavily involved in my life, the kind of people who felt entitled to a say in every decision I made, from what I studied in college to what kind of furniture I bought for my apartment. When my husband and I had our son Ethan, that dynamic didn't magically change. If anything, it became more intense. Suddenly, I wasn't just their child, I was a parent, and in their eyes, they had the right to step into that role whenever they pleased. Ethan had just started first grade. My husband and I worked out a very careful routine to make sure drop offs and pickups were safe, predictable, and comforting for him. He was a shy kid, easily overwhelmed by sudden changes, and structure mattered to him. I picked him up most afternoons, and on the days I couldn't, either my husband or my sister in law, who was officially listed on the school forms, would take care of it. Then, one Tuesday, I arrived at the school right on time, only to be told by the teacher's aide that Ethan had already been picked up. My heart dropped into my stomach. I frantically asked, "By who?" And the aide casually said, "Oh, his grandparents. They said they were here to help since you were running late." I wasn't running late. I was standing there at the time. I always did. Panic surged through me as I grabbed my phone and called my mom. Sure enough, she answered cheerfully, "Don't worry, honey, we've got him. We thought we'd surprise you. He's with us now." I can't even describe the cocktail of emotions that ran through me in that moment. Relief that my son was safe, yes, but also a searing anger. How could they think this was okay? How could the school just hand my child over without even calling me? I demanded they bring Ethan back home immediately, and they seemed baffled by my fury. "We just wanted to give you a break," my mom said, like this was some grand favor. When they pulled up to my house, Ethan jumped out of the car looking confused. He clung to my hand, asking softly, "Why didn't you tell me Grandma and Grandpa were picking me up?" I bent down and hugged him tight. "Because I didn't know, sweetheart," I whispered. That night, my parents came inside, expecting gratitude. Instead, they were met with my trembling rage. "You do not ever take my child from school without telling me. Do you understand how terrifying that was?" I said, voice shaking. My dad frowned, looking more annoyed than apologetic. "We raised you, didn't we? We know how to take care of a child. It's no big deal." But it was a big deal. It was a violation of trust, a terrifying breach of safety. Ethan needed stability. I needed to know that my son was secure. And if my parents couldn't respect that, then lines were going to have to be drawn. As they left that night, my mom huffed, "You're overreacting." But deep down, I knew this wasn't going to be the last time I had to fight this battle. The very next day, I went straight to the school before classes began. I asked to speak to the principal and the front office staff. My voice was calm but firm, every word fueled by the anger and fear I'd felt the day before. My parents are not on the list of authorized pickups for Ethan. They should never be allowed to take him from this school again. If they try, you need to call me immediately. Do you understand? The principal, Mrs. Caldwell, nodded sympathetically, but there was an awkward shuffle among the staff. The aide who had released Ethan looked embarrassed. "We thought it was okay because they said they were his grandparents." I cut her off. "Do not assume. You call me. You check the forms. That's why they exist. If my child is released to someone I haven't approved, you're putting him in danger." They promised it wouldn't happen again, but I didn't leave feeling reassured. I felt like I was plugging leaks in a dam, one that my parents seemed determined to keep poking holes into. That evening, I called my mom. I thought maybe, if I explained clearly enough, they'd understand. "You scared Ethan. You scared me. I need you to respect my role as his mother. If you want to see him, you ask me and I'll make it happen. But you cannot just show up at school and take him." Her response was instant defensiveness. "We weren't kidnapping him. We're his grandparents. We love him. We were just trying to help. Back in our day, families didn't make such a fuss about these things." I felt my blood pressure rise. "Well, this isn't back in your day. This is my child, my rules." My dad chimed in on speakerphone, his tone sharp. "You're being ungrateful. Most people would love to have parents so involved. You're making it sound like we're the enemy." I pressed my hand against my forehead. I'm not saying you're the enemy. I'm saying there have to be boundaries. Ethan is my responsibility. If you want to be in his life, you follow the rules I set. That's not negotiable. Silence hung on the line for a few seconds before my mom sighed dramatically. Fine. If that's how you want to treat us, then maybe we won't bother helping at all. The passive-aggressive guilt trip was classic. I could practically hear the disappointment dripping from her words, as if I'd committed some betrayal. But instead of caving like I often did, I just said, "That's your choice. But this isn't up for debate." I hung up, heart pounding, and for the first time, I realized this wasn't just about one incident. My parents had always had trouble respecting boundaries, but now that Ethan was involved, the stakes were higher. Later that night, when I tucked Ethan into bed, he asked me quietly, "Mom, are Grandma and Grandpa mad at you?" His little voice wobbled with uncertainty. I smoothed his hair and kissed his forehead. "They're not mad at you, and they're not really mad at me either. They just need to remember that I'm the one who keeps you safe. That's my job." He nodded, comforted, but I lay awake long after he fell asleep, wondering if my parents would actually respect what I said or if this was only the beginning of a bigger war. I should have known that my parents wouldn't let the issue drop. For about a week, things were oddly quiet. No unexpected phone calls, no unannounced visits. I almost allowed myself to believe that maybe they had finally taken me seriously. But then came Saturday morning, when my mom showed up at my front door with a bag of groceries and a tight smile. "I thought I'd make Ethan some of my special chicken soup," she said, brushing past me before I could even respond. "He loves it." I stood frozen for a moment, trying to decide whether to confront her immediately or wait until Ethan wasn't watching. He came running into the kitchen, delighted to see his grandma, and she scooped him up with a satisfied grin. My dad followed behind with a box of toys, as if this were some grand surprise party. I took a deep breath. "Mom, Dad, I told you, if you want to come over, you need to call first. You can't just show up and take over my kitchen." My mom frowned, ladling broth into a pot. "We're just trying to help. You're so stressed with work, with everything. Why do you insist on making everything difficult?" "It's not difficult," I snapped. "It's about respect. I'm Ethan's mom, not you. I make the rules for this house and for him." My dad's voice boomed across the room, frustration spilling out. "You're overreacting. We raised you, didn't we? You turned out fine. We know what we're doing." The irony wasn't lost on me. This assumption that raising me automatically gave them permanent authority over how I raised my own child. I felt my jaw clench. Yes, you raised me, but I'm not a child anymore. And Ethan isn't your responsibility. He's mine. The air grew tense. My mom stirred the soup furiously, refusing to meet my eyes. Ethan, sensing the sharp tone in the room, hugged her leg and looked between us nervously. My heart ached, but I couldn't back down. Not when he was watching. Later that evening, after they finally left, I noticed something strange. Ethan was unusually quiet, curled up on the couch with his toy car. When I asked what was wrong, he whispered, "Grandma said I should listen to her because she knows better. But I want to listen to you, Mom. I don't want to get in trouble." My chest tightened. So it had begun. The subtle undermining, the quiet suggestions meant to make him doubt me. That was the moment I realized my parents weren't just ignoring my rules. They were actively trying to overwrite them. I knelt beside him and took his small hands in mine. "You never have to choose between us, okay? You listen to me because I'm your mom, and my job is to take care of you. Grandma and Grandpa love you, but sometimes they forget that I'm the one in charge." "That's not your fault." He nodded, eyes wide, and hugged me tightly. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't shake the anger simmering inside me. This wasn't just about boundaries anymore. It was about control, about my parents refusing to see me as an adult, capable of raising my own son. And now, they were dragging Ethan into the middle of it. I knew then that if I didn't put my foot down harder, louder, firmer, they would never stop pushing. And the next battle was likely just around the corner. The following week, everything seemed normal, too normal, in fact. My parents hadn't called, hadn't dropped by, hadn't even sent their usual thinking of you texts. For a brief moment, I felt relieved. Maybe they were finally respecting my boundaries. But relief quickly turned into suspicion. Silence from them usually meant they were planning something. I didn't find out what until Thursday afternoon. I was still at work when my phone buzzed with a message from Ethan's teacher. Just to confirm, your parents are authorized to pick Ethan up today? My heart stopped. My parents had shown up at Ethan's school again without telling me. I immediately called the school. The secretary explained almost apologetically, "Your parents are here insisting that you told them it was fine to pick Ethan up. We just wanted to make sure before we released him." My stomach twisted. "Absolutely not," I said firmly. "They do not have my permission to pick up my child. Please do not release him to anyone except me or the authorized contacts I've listed." The secretary reassured me they wouldn't let him go, and I left work early to get Ethan myself. When I arrived, I saw my parents in the office lobby, clearly agitated. My mom's arms were crossed, and my dad paced the floor like a caged animal. "Why are you making such a big deal out of this?" My dad barked the moment he saw me. "We just wanted to spend some time with our grandson. You act like we're strangers." "You lied," I snapped, my voice low, but shaking with fury. "You told the school I gave you permission. That is crossing a line." My mom's eyes widened with mock innocence. "We just thought maybe you forgot to add us to the list. We were only trying to help since you're so busy." I turned to Ethan, who was sitting in a chair nearby, clutching his backpack like a shield. His eyes darted between us nervously. My anger deepened, not just because of what they'd done, but because he had to sit there and watch it unfold. I crouched down to his level and said softly, "It's okay, buddy. You're coming home with me." He nodded, visibly relieved. As we walked out, my dad's voice boomed again. "You're going to regret treating us this way. You're pushing us out of his life, and one day you'll see how wrong you are." The words burned, but I refused to turn back. My hands shook on the steering wheel as I drove home, Ethan quiet in the back seat. I knew this wasn't over. My parents weren't just ignoring my boundaries, they were trying to erase them completely. That night, after putting Ethan to bed, I sat at the kitchen table and pulled out the school paperwork. I realized I had to be more explicit. I emailed the principal directly, explaining the situation and stressing that under no circumstances should my parents ever be allowed to pick Ethan up. I gave them a list of trusted people and asked that they call me immediately if anyone else ever tried. It felt drastic, even harsh, but I couldn't risk it happening again. My parents had crossed the line from overbearing into dangerous territory. And while part of me grieved the fact that things had come to this, another part of me felt strangely empowered. For once, I was the one drawing the line, and this time I intended to hold it. A week later, my cousin's birthday party rolled around. Normally, I would have skipped it, knowing my parents would be there. But Ethan loved spending time with his cousins. I didn't want him to miss out on family just because of the mess between me and my parents. So, I took a deep breath, packed him into the car, and told myself I could survive a couple of hours. The moment we walked in, I felt the tension. My mom's eyes locked onto me across the room, her expression already sour. My dad muttered something under his breath to one of my uncles, and I could feel the whispers spreading like wildfire. Clearly, they'd already painted me as the ungrateful child who denied them access to their grandson. I tried to focus on Ethan, who ran off happily to play. For a few blissful minutes, I managed to chat with my cousins, laugh at the kids' antics, and pretend things were fine, but of course it didn't last. It started when my aunt asked innocently, "So, what's this I hear about you not letting your parents pick Ethan up from school?" The room seemed to still. My parents' faces were smug. They'd been telling their version of the story, twisting the truth into something unrecognizable. I set my drink down slowly, my heart hammering. "That's right," I said calmly but firmly. "I don't allow anyone to pick him up unless I've given explicit permission. My parents tried to take him without telling me, and they even lied to the school about it." Gasps rippled through the room. My mom's face turned red. "That's not true," she shouted. "We never lied. We just assumed you'd want us to help." I shook my head. "No. You told the school I gave you permission when I didn't. That's not help. That's deception." The tension exploded like a thunderclap. My dad's voice boomed over everyone else's. "You're alienating us from our grandson. Do you want him to grow up thinking we don't exist? That's emotional abuse, keeping him from his grandparents. I took a deep breath, fighting to keep my composure. No. What's abusive is ignoring my boundaries and making my child feel unsafe. Ethan was scared that day. He didn't understand why you were trying to take him when I wasn't there. The room fell quiet. Some relatives looked shocked, others sympathetic. My cousin's husband finally spoke up, breaking the silence. They're her kid, her rules. End of story. That single statement shifted the atmosphere. My parents' faces darkened, but a few relatives nodded in agreement. My mom tried to rally, insisting, "We're only trying to do what's best." But I cut her off, my voice sharp. What's best for Ethan is stability and respect. If you can't give him that, then you don't get to be part of his life. The words hung in the air, heavy and unmovable. My parents glared at me, but for once, they didn't have a quick retort. I scooped up Ethan after the cake was cut and left before things could boil over again. Driving home, my hands still trembled on the wheel. Part of me felt guilty for airing our issues in front of the entire family. But another part, the stronger part, felt like I'd finally spoken the truth out loud, without apology. It was messy, yes, but maybe it was the only way to make them finally understand that I was serious. After the birthday party, I hoped my parents might cool off, maybe even reflect on what I'd said. Instead, they doubled down. If anything, their behavior grew more alarming. They stopped trying to argue with me directly and started focusing on Ethan. It began with small things. One afternoon, Ethan came home from school with a note tucked into his backpack. It was written in my mom's handwriting. "Grandma and Grandpa love you so much. Don't forget, you can always come to us if you need anything." My stomach dropped. It wasn't sinister on the surface, but it was a clear attempt to bypass me and reach Ethan directly. When I asked him where it came from, he shrugged and said, "Grandma gave it to me when I was walking to the bus." I was furious. They weren't just ignoring my boundaries anymore. They were actively undermining me. I called my mom that evening, my voice shaking with anger. "Do not ever slip notes to my son again. If you want to send him a message, it comes through me, period." She had the audacity to act innocent. What's the harm in letting him know we love him? You're so controlling. You're poisoning him against us. "No," I snapped. "I'm protecting him from manipulation. You've crossed a line. If it happens again, I'll take legal steps." That got her quiet, but only for a moment. Legal steps? Against your own parents? You'd really drag us to court over a note? She hissed, her voice trembling with outrage. "If it means keeping Ethan safe, yes," I said, and hung up before I could say anything worse. But they weren't finished. A few days later, my dad showed up at the soccer field during Ethan's practice. I didn't notice at first. I was talking to another parent, but Ethan came running over, looking anxious. "Grandpa says he can take me for ice cream after practice," he whispered, clearly torn between excitement and confusion. I looked up and saw my dad standing at the fence, waving casually like nothing was wrong. My blood boiled. I walked straight over, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "What are you doing here?" I demanded. "Just watching my grandson play soccer," he said smoothly, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I thought I'd surprise him. "You don't get to just show up and invite him out without asking me," I shot back, keeping my voice low but firm. "You know the rules. You know why we have them." His face hardened. "Rules? He's not your property. He's family. You can't keep him from us forever." I felt every eye at the field burning into us, but I didn't care. "If you keep pushing like this, I'll have no choice but to cut you off completely. Is that what you want?" He didn't answer. He just stared at me for a long, uncomfortable moment, before turning and walking away without another word. That night, Ethan asked me why Grandma and Grandpa were so upset. I sat him down and explained gently that sometimes grown-ups made mistakes, even family, and that it was my job to keep him safe and make sure rules were followed. He seemed to understand, but I could see the worry on his little face. It broke my heart. My parents' stubbornness wasn't just hurting me anymore. It was putting Ethan right in the middle of a tug-of-war he never asked for. And deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. If anything, they were only going to escalate further. Things came to a head on a gray Thursday afternoon that started like any other. Ethan was supposed to walk home from school with a group of friends while I finished work from home. He usually came through the door by 3:15. By 3:30, he wasn't home. At first, I told myself maybe the group was just slow, maybe they stopped to trade Pokemon cards or grab a snack at the corner store. But by 3:45, my stomach was in knots. I pulled out my phone and called one of the other parents. "Hey, did Ethan walk with the kids today?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a pause. "He started to," she said carefully. "But then I saw your mom pick him up outside the school. I figured it was planned." The blood drained from my face. My parents had taken him, without asking, without permission, without even telling me. I hung up and immediately dialed my mom. She answered, her tone chipper and infuriatingly casual. "We're just at the diner having a milkshake. Don't worry. Don't worry." I nearly screamed into the phone. "You kidnapped my son!" "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she huffed. "We're his grandparents. He wanted to come with us, and we thought it would be a nice surprise. You overreact to everything." "Where exactly are you?" I demanded. "The diner on 3rd, she replied flatly, like she was daring me to make a scene. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my keys, heart racing, and drove faster than I should have, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. By the time I got there, I spotted Ethan through the window, sitting in a booth with a half-melted milkshake, looking anxious. My parents were chatting like nothing was wrong. I marched inside and straight to their booth. "Ethan, get your things. We're leaving." He looked at me wide-eyed and scrambled to slide out of the booth. My mom reached across the table as if to block him. "Don't you dare make a scene," she hissed. But I was done playing nice. "You crossed the line," I said, my voice low but shaking with rage. "You picked up my child without permission. You do not get to do that, ever, again." My dad stood up, trying to use his size to intimidate me. "We're his family. You're treating us like strangers. You can't keep him from us." I didn't back down. "I can, and I will. If you try this again, I'll call the police and file a report. Do you understand me?" The entire diner had gone silent, people pretending not to watch while sneaking glances. My parents looked utterly shocked, as if they couldn't believe I was serious. But I was dead serious. Ethan clutched my hand as we walked out, his milkshake abandoned on the table. In the car, he whispered, "Did I do something wrong?" My heart broke. "No, sweetheart," I said softly, squeezing his hand. "You didn't do anything wrong. Grown-ups did." That night, after I tucked Ethan into bed, I sat at the kitchen table shaking with adrenaline and fear. My parents weren't just boundary pushing anymore. They were dangerous. They thought they had the right to ignore me as Ethan's parent. And if I didn't act fast, I knew they'd try again. The next morning, I woke up with the same knot of dread in my stomach. It wasn't just about what had happened. It was the realization that if my parents had the audacity to take Ethan once, nothing was stopping them from trying again. They didn't see it as wrong. They saw it as their right. I spent half the day pacing the living room, replaying the scene in the diner, imagining all the ways it could have gone worse. What if I hadn't found out so quickly? What if they had driven Ethan out of town? What if something had happened to him while he was with them? The thought was unbearable. By noon, I'd had enough. I picked up my phone and called a family lawyer. I'd never done anything like this before, and my hands were clammy as I explained the situation. The lawyer listened quietly and then said firmly, "You're his legal parent. They have no rights to pick him up without your consent. What they did was unlawful, and if you want, we can put protections in place to make sure it doesn't happen again." Hearing those words lifted a weight off my chest. For weeks, I'd been made to feel like I was overreacting, like I was some controlling tyrant keeping loving grandparents away. But now, a professional was validating my feelings. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't cruel, I was protecting my child. That evening, I called my parents. My mom answered, her tone curt, already on the defensive. "I hope you've calmed down." "No," I said firmly. "I haven't, and I need you to listen very carefully. What you did yesterday was unacceptable. It was dangerous. It will never happen again. If you ever pick Ethan up without my permission, I will call the police and press charges. I've already spoken to a lawyer. There was silence on the other end. Then my dad's voice cut in, low and angry. You wouldn't dare. I would, I said, steady as stone. Try me. My mom scoffed. You're overreacting as usual. You can't erase us from his life. He's our grandson. He loves us. This isn't about love, I snapped. This is about safety and respect. If you can't follow my rules as his parent, then you don't get to see him at all. I hung up before they could answer. My heart was racing, but also lighter. For the first time, I felt like I'd drawn a clear line. Over the next week, my parents tried to reach out angry texts, guilt-ridden voicemails, even an unannounced visit to the house where I refused to open the door. Ethan asked a few times why we weren't seeing them, and I told him gently that they had broken the rules and needed some time before visits could happen again. He nodded, clearly sensing the tension, but seemed relieved that I wasn't angry at him. By the weekend, I sat in bed with my laptop, drafting an official letter through the lawyer's advice. A written notice to my parents stating clearly that they were not to pick Ethan up, visit the school, or take him anywhere without my explicit consent. The letter wasn't just words. It was the boundary in black and white. I hesitated before hitting send. It felt like crossing a bridge I couldn't come back from. But then I thought of Ethan's little voice in the car that day. Did I do something wrong? And I pressed to send without another second of doubt. From that moment on, it wasn't about keeping the peace. It was about protecting my son at all costs. It didn't take long for the fallout to spread. Within days of sending the letter, my phone started buzzing with calls and texts from extended family. My aunt messaged me first. Your mom is heartbroken. She said you threatened to have her arrested just for loving her grandson. Is that true? Then my cousin chimed in. Look, I don't know all the details, but maybe you're being too harsh. They're just trying to help. Even my brother, who rarely ever weighed in on family drama, sent a curt text. You've really gone too far this time. Mom's in tears. It was clear my parents were telling their version of the story, a watered-down version where they were the innocent grandparents and I was the cruel, ungrateful daughter. I knew the narrative well. They'd been experts at controlling perception my whole life. But this time, I refused to stay silent. When my aunt called, I calmly explained. They took Ethan from school without telling me. They lied to me about it until I tracked them down. That's not love, it's crossing boundaries. It's dangerous. My aunt was quiet for a long time before finally saying, well, that doesn't sound right. But you know how your parents are. They probably didn't mean harm. That's the problem, I said. Dad, they don't see the harm because they don't respect me as a parent. If I let this go, they'll do it again. The more I explained, the more I realized I didn't owe anyone an apology or justification. I wasn't on trial. I was a mother protecting her child. Meanwhile, my parents doubled down. My mom sent me long emails filled with emotional appeals. How lonely she felt, how much Ethan needed her, how she had raised me and therefore knew better. My dad, on the other hand, went silent, which somehow felt worse. The silence meant he wasn't budging. The hardest part was seeing the effect it had on Ethan. He would ask, when can I see Grandma and Grandpa again? And every time, my stomach twisted. I didn't want him to feel like he was losing family because of me. So I told him gently, Grandma and Grandpa broke the rules, and until they can promise to follow them, we need to take a break. To my surprise, Ethan seemed to understand. One evening, while drawing at the kitchen table, he said, sometimes when people don't listen, you have to make them listen, right? I smiled sadly. Something like that, buddy. Still, I wasn't naive. I knew my parents weren't going to back down quietly. They thrived on control and appearances. If they couldn't win me over, they would find another way through, pressure, manipulation, or turning the rest of the family against me. By the end of the week, I made another difficult decision. I told Ethan's school to update his emergency contact list. My parents' names and numbers were removed. I gave the school copies of the lawyer's letter and told them, in no uncertain terms, that if my parents showed up, they were not to release Ethan under any circumstance. The principal gave me a sympathetic nod. We've dealt with situations like this before. Don't worry, your son is safe here. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of relief. The fortress was holding. But I knew it was only a matter of time before my parents made their next move. And deep down, I could sense it would be bigger and uglier than anything they'd tried before. It happened on a Saturday afternoon, 2 weeks after the lawyer's letter had been sent. I had taken Ethan to the park for some fresh air, trying to give him normal weekends again. We were playing tag, laughing as he darted between trees when I saw them. My parents standing by the path, watching us. My stomach dropped. They hadn't called, hadn't texted, nothing. They had just shown up. "Mom," Ethan cried out with joy, running toward them. My mother bent down, arms open wide. Instinct kicked in, and I rushed forward, intercepting him before he reached her. "Ethan," I said firmly, holding his shoulders, "remember what we talked about? You stay with me, okay?" He looked confused, but nodded. My mom's face crumpled. "How could you? You're keeping him from us. Look at him, he wants to see us." My dad crossed his arms. His silence carried more weight than shouting ever could. "This is cruel, Anna. You're destroying this family." I took a deep breath, my hands trembling, but my voice steady. "No. You destroyed trust when you took him without permission. You crossed a line. And until you acknowledge that, things can't go back to normal." Ethan clutched my hand, sensing the tension. My mom reached out like she was about to grab him, but I stepped back. "Don't," I said sharply. "You don't get to do that." Other parents in the park started staring. The humiliation on my mom's face turned into something darker anger. "Do you hear yourself? Threatening your own parents in public? You should be ashamed." I felt something inside me snap. Years of guilt, manipulation, emotional blackmail. It all boiled to the surface. "No, Mom, I'm not ashamed. I'm done being controlled. I'm done letting you walk over my boundaries. This is my child. My responsibility, not yours." For a moment, everything was still. For a moment, my mom's mouth opened, then closed. My dad's jaw tightened. And then, without another word, they turned and walked away. Ethan squeezed my hand. "Are they mad?" he asked quietly. "They're upset," I said honestly. "But sometimes people get upset when you make rules they don't like. It doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you're protecting yourself." That night, I sat in my room after Ethan went to bed, letting the weight of it sink in. The confrontation hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. My parents weren't going to change overnight. Maybe they'd never change. But I had drawn the line, and for once I hadn't backed down. Over the next few weeks, the phone calls slowed, the guilt-ridden emails stopped, and the family gossip quieted down. I knew the silence wasn't peace, it was distance, but it was the kind of distance I needed. I had always believed that family was forever, that blood bound you in ways nothing else could. But now, I understood something more important. Respect was the true bond. Without it, family was just a word. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a scared daughter trying to appease her parents. I felt like a mother standing tall for her son. Ethan was safe, I was free, and that was enough. And that was